This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Priority. Where exactly do you store up your treasure, if you will? Where is it that you put your value in this life? I can only speak from my experience. I value the time that I have with my kids. My son, who is an adult now, is still in college. He still comes to me for advice, which is amazing in and of itself. But those moments that I have with him now make me reflective of the times that I had with him when he was younger, learning baseball, for instance, playing golf, traveling, and there is nothing you can do to replace that time. Today, I want to talk about a case involving a father and a son, a young man named Grant Solomon, and a life that was tragically brought to a very sudden end at 18 years of age. My name is Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I'm trying to think back right now through the hazy mist of time, trying to remember what my first car was. I think, if I remember correctly, yeah, I know it was because I was almost killed in it. I had a 1969 Mustang with a 302 3-speed, and it was a piece of junk that got for $600 and had it repainted, restored, not to a great degree. It would not have done well in a car show, but it was functional for a 17-year-old. And boy, was I proud of it. And a drunk driver, blew a stoplight and hit me in the front right side of my car and almost killed me. I was paralyzed for a little while. I lost the use of the left side of my body. I was going to play college football and lost every opportunity that I had because of a severe neck injury. And thankfully recovered from that. But I remember that car so fondly because it was my first. It was my first. It's something that I valued. And my mom was a big part of me possessing that car and having that car. And when you're a kid that age, your identity kind of gets tied up in that sort of thing, doesn't it? Grant Solomon also had a vehicle. It was, I think, a 2015 Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, I think. A white one, as a matter of fact. And nice vehicle. Very nice vehicle. 4-door.
Grant Solomon had just turned 18 years old, and he had that 2015 Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, 4-door. One of the things about Grant Solomon that I want to point out from the very beginning, he was blue chip athlete, 6'4", 210 pounds at 18, and he could play some ball. He excelled in athletics. Grant Solomon's mom and dad, Aaron Solomon and Angie Solomon. Aaron Solomon was a well-known sports anchor and then later a morning show television news anchor of some note in their area of Tennessee where they lived. And his mom, Angie, was a doctor of pharmacology. Grant has a younger sister. Now, Grant's mother and father, Aaron and Angie, had gone through a horrific divorce. It's July 20th of 2020. Well, here's the scene then. Grant Solomon and his father, Aaron Solomon, they meet at Ward Performance Institute in Gallatin, Tennessee. This is a facility for baseball players to work out, get some private coaching, and to work on different aspects of their game. As I mentioned, Grant Solomon is a blue chip athlete. He's a baseball player. Many colleges are looking at him. While they were there, and it's not unusual for them to have been at a place like this, it was about an hour-long drive for Grant to get to Ward Performance Institute, but they didn't have an appointment. And you need to have an appointment. You actually have to plan because they have instructions for you to prepare to be there. And you actually work on these things and you show up ready to work, ready to learn your craft.
So what you're saying is that if you were under the tutelage of an instructor like this, there would be a prescribed regimen that you would have had to have gone through beforehand. And I would imagine there'd be other people waiting in line, too, for these time slots as well.
But they arrive. Aaron Solomon is there first. Grant Solomon arrives second in his Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. It is a 4-door model. At this point, they are both parked side by side in the parking lot.
You're thinking about Grant's circumstances as he is arriving at this facility. When you're a young kid and you're a new driver, there's many times you forget to do certain things. Maybe you forget an item that's in the vehicle. Maybe even you forget to put your vehicle in park or even turn it off because you're so unsettled at that point in time in your life. You don't necessarily systematically think about things. You're reactionary. And what has been alleged is that Grant's truck got away from him, essentially, as he had stepped out of the vehicle. And of course, it led to his death. In my estimation, I'd have to say, and I know it's rather simplistic, but I'd have to say that the value of an eyewitness in many cases involving death is certainly important. But when you begin to think about car accidents in particular, we hear a lot of witness statements. I have over the years. I've taken witness statements. The dynamics of them can be so very, very complicated because of the many layers that are involved, the behavior of the individual that is, particularly if they're a pedestrian that's struck by a vehicle, were they aware that this was happening? Did they see it coming? Did they try to avoid a vehicle? And also the behavior, if you will, of the vehicle itself. If it's a vehicle that's being driven by somebody, did somebody brake? Did they swerve? But if it's a runaway vehicle, you really want to try to understand that. And so eyewitness testimony in cases like this are more valuable than gold from an investigative standpoint, Dave.
This story really hit home with me because we had an SUV in our driveway at my house. It was in park. At the time, my grandson Braylon was about 2, maybe not even 2, in his car seat, thankfully. My wife LaDonna was in the passenger side seat. Hannah had put the car in park and had gotten out to do something, lock the door or whatever at the house. Keys are in the ignition. The vehicle's in park. All of a sudden, there was a malfunction. It kicked out of park and the car rolled down the hill. LaDonna's in the passenger seat. 2-year-old grandson's in the back in his car seat. And all LaDonna could do, she couldn't reach over to hit the brake. She couldn't do anything except try to steer the wheel so it wouldn't go out into the road. And she was able to get it enough so that the car spun and went into our woods. And it was totaled in the space of 30 yards of my driveway. There was a malfunction, Joe, in that vehicle because I wanted to know, how did this happen? How is this possible? Well, we found out there was a mechanical break in this thing.
Wait, you just said you found out?
Yes.
Well, gee, Dave, how in fact did you find out? I would assume you had to have asked someone to take it. I mean, God love you. I think you're a bright guy. When it comes to transmissions and all of that stuff, are you an expert? I mean, I would assume you had to have somebody look at it to give you an assessment, right?
Well, the insurance company made me do that. I wondered about it. I questioned it. There is an investigation. You realize you need a police report, even when it happens on your property, because insurance is not going to pay something if they don't have to. And so we did an investigation. They determined that something broke in the transmission that allowed this to happen. It was a freak accident.
For us in forensics, people don't normally think about this. Mechanics, in particular, are some of our biggest resources when it comes to accident investigation. Because, you see a state trooper, for instance, or maybe a local police officer, and they're out in the middle of the road and they are part of an accident investigation team where you see them using the laser total station. They're taking all these points of measurement. You see if you ever see like the bright orange paint in the middle of the road where it's marking tire tracks and it's also marking points of impact, you'll see all this weird coating that's kind of painted onto the surface of a roadway. That's part of what the accident team does, but that's only the beginning. Many times with vehicles, those vehicles will be flatbedded into a location where they can be assessed by a mechanic. And that's another big part to an investigation. And just to understand, with Grant's death, which seemingly comes about as a result of his truck, this heavy truck, this truck, it's not some tiny little thing that I don't care how powerful of an athlete he was. You're talking about a truck that weighs anywhere from, the curb weight is anywhere from about 3,600 pounds to almost 4,300 pounds. It's a 4-door truck. It's heavy.
This is the explanation of what happened according to Aaron Solomon, who was the only person we know that was sitting right there. These are his words from the police report. My son Grant and I pulled into WPI separately, parked side by side. I was still in my car, but noticed my son got out to get his baseball gear out of the back of his truck. I looked down to check a work email, and the next thing I know, I hear the truck rolling backwards into the ditch. I get out of my car to try to find my son and saw that he was trapped underneath the truck and immediately called 911.
One of the things that I was very curious about, Dave, in this case, the father alleges in his initial report that Grant went into the bed of his truck to retrieve his bag. And somewhere along the way, that story was changed.
It was actually 5 days later.
My understanding is he normally kept it in the cab of the truck.
So we have the first statement to the police. The next thing was actually a week later, 5 days, give or take, and it was recorded by Grant's mother, Grace. Now, remember, Grace and Aaron Solomon were divorced. Bottom line here is we had Aaron's first story to police, looks down in an email, looks back up, truck's gone, rolling down the hill. Where's Grant? Now, a couple of days later, he is explaining this to Grant's mother. The way the video, I've actually watched this, it appears to be a video that she recorded on her phone. You never get a full-on video of his face. You really are looking at his feet, but you can clearly hear him, explain to Grant's mother, Angie, what happened. He said, quote, I didn't see to the point where he gets to this. And at this point, Aaron is showing Angie how Grant was getting his baseball gear out of the back seat of the truck, not the bed of the truck, out of the back seat, directly behind the driver's seat. He's standing there at the door. He says, this is the last thing I see. Angie asks, did he close that door? Aaron says he was closing the door. He's referring to the back door. That's what he's actually pointing at. He was closing the door when I saw him. And so, pause, and the doors were closed when I get out. He has changed his story in the space of a couple of days from Grant is getting his stuff out of the back bed of the truck to out of the back seat of the truck, and the door is now open and closed.
It's an amazing dynamic when you look at the facility itself.
The parking lot?
The parking lot and the building. The building is kind of a standard aluminum-sided type of building like you see where people will set up garages and those sorts of things for their businesses on the side of the road. It's a kind of a tall structure. Maybe, I don't know if I would call it a 2-story, but it has to be large enough. The building itself has to be large enough to accommodate somebody swinging a bat in there with probably a pitching machine, a pitching mound. With that said, there is an asphalted parking lot in front of it. And so where the truck winds up adjacent to the roadway where they have turned in to enter into the parking lot. And this is like from the road to that parking area, this is probably at minimum a 20% grade that you're going up, possibly 30. So it's pitched up. And here's the thing. The way this dynamic appears to have happened is that, according to what they're saying, is that when this truck rolled back, it apparently captured Grant in some way and drug him along down this pitched parking lot, down into a drainage ditch where the truck comes to rest facing back toward the building, and Grant is found beneath the truck. Dave, I don't know if you know this or not, but we've covered some cases on body bags involving bludgeoning, and that goes to what's referred to as blunt force trauma. Did you know that the number one cause of blunt force trauma in America it has nothing to do with somebody wielding item to hit somebody in the head with or anything like that? It involves motor vehicle accidents. That's the number one cause of blunt force trauma to bodies. It's what brings about death. In Grant Solomon's case, we're talking about what would arguably be, from a dynamic standpoint, a pretty horrific event as it applies to the trauma that would be witnessed on this young man's body. And for my money, when you're talking about this, we're missing a few things here.
Based on description of what took place, what will we expect to find on Grant Solomon's body had he been drugged by his 2015 Toyota Tacoma pickup truck? If he had been dragged down the parking lot all the way into the ditch at the truck resting on his body, what would we expect to see?
Well, look, I'm not trying to be a smart aleck by responding to you this way, but one of the things you would expect to see are drag marks. And I don't mean drag marks in the sense of when we're talking about working a crime scene where we're looking to see if someone has drug a body off. That's not what we're talking about. Drag marks, everybody just kind of take a look at your arm right now and imagine you've got a superficial abrasion, say on the surface, the palmar surface of your hand or maybe on your forearm. And everybody knows what an abrasion looks like. And with drag marks in particular, they're going to be what's referred to as many times striated, which means they've got multiple little lines that you'll see. And it's an abrasion where the skin, that top layer of skin, the epidermis and the dermis, which is just below the epidermis, begin to kind of peel back because it's a friction kind of injury where you're fighting to maintain one position, but yet you're being drugged along, and this is what's allegedly happened. Remember, we're talking about a 3,600-pound plus vehicle dragging this young man along. You would have drag marks all over the body. Any exposed area where if you've got bare arms or bare legs, maybe he's in shorts, you'll see them on the sides of the face many times. It will be the nastiest abrasion that you will ever see. And you see them particularly where pedestrians are struck by vehicles. And if they are caught beneath the undercarriage of a vehicle, because the vehicle is not going to stop moving until either someone brakes, somebody puts it in park, or just the, say, for instance, the inertial energy of that potential energy that's in a vehicle this heavy where you have it sitting on a grade of 25 degrees, say, for instance, where that energy is going to dissipate and finally it's going to come into a resting position. Maybe the geography is going to dictate that, where we have a ditch here. There's no way, because you're fighting against it. You're still alive. You're trying to fight. And so that contact with these surfaces is really going to rough your skin up. David, there's nothing like that here. I mean, there's nothing like it. You're talking about him literally being pulled along the surface of an asphalt parking lot, which all of us can identify with, downhill, which is covered in grass. And we still don't know how many grass stains were on his clothing. That's something else, and dirt marks that we look for. And they can be striated as well. You'll see that kind of contacting onto the surface of clothing and to flesh. And also where the truck has come to rest, Dave, there is a huge collection, because it literally comes to rest in a ditch. There is a huge collection of drainage rocks. And when I say drainage rocks, I'm not talking about like pea gravel. I am talking about these big rough edge stones. And it doesn't take a forensic scientist to sit here and tell you what kind of damage that could do to a body. But yet there's something lacking when it comes to injuries on Grant's remains.
And what about his shoes? Would I expect to see some kind of drag marks on the heel or bottom or sides of those shoes?
One of the things we try to do, as humans, when we're reacting to being kind of caught up in the energy of something that is moving us along, is to stop it. And I've seen images of Grant's shoes. They've got wear on them, but relatively speaking, compared to what you would normally see at an accident scene with a motor vehicle, you're going to have significant scuff marks on them. You'll have trace contact that will many times ravage any kind of material that's associated with it. The shoes are in really good condition. Grant's mother was in possession of the shoes. And here's one other thing that you see. When it comes to a vehicle dragging somebody along, the other thing that you will see is not just injuries to the tissue, where the tissue is greatly disrupted, but you will also see what are referred to as rollover injuries. Okay, let me kind of run that down to you, tell you what happens with rollover injuries. If you are literally rolled over, say you're caught beneath the undercarriage of a vehicle, there is this dynamic where your body is kind of spinning in this environment as well. Clothing is getting twisted, you're moving around, your clothing will actually be torn. And if a car completely clears an individual, say the tires roll over a body, you've got the dynamic of the tire spinning, you'll have tire tread marks on bodies. Many times you can actually see the imprint of tire treads on flesh, and the skin will be, not just the skin will be torn, but the clothing will be torn, Dave. And if you don't believe that cars can leave behind trace evidence, everybody out there hearing my voice, do yourself a favor. Go out to your car. I wouldn't recommend you do this after you've just shut it off, but stick your hand underneath the car and press the underside of it and draw your hand out and see if your hand, what the surface of your palm looks like after that. You're going to have road dirt all over your hand. You'll have grease deposition. Sometimes there's all of this kind of contact trace that winds up on the body. And to the best of our understanding at this point, there's really no evidence of that. But I think that Grant did have some pretty significant injuries, if I'm not mistaken, but they're very specific, aren't they, Dave?
You pointed out something about going out to your car and touching the underside. And you said, don't do it if it's hot, wait till it cools down. And that's important to note here, because what we do know is that Grant has just driven his car over an hour across 3 counties and arrives at this facility at about 8:30 in the morning. The 911 call is placed at 8:44 in the morning. So 15 minutes after arrival, I would expect that car undercarriage would be hot and dirty from the hour-long drive. We also, up to this point, all we know is the story that we're told from Aaron Solomon, the father. And a couple of things of note. He doesn't say he heard Grant scream, just that he hears the car rolling. On the 911 call, he is referring to 3 other men helping to get his son from underneath this vehicle. When police arrive, these 3 men who stopped everything to try to help this young man, they're gone.
And have the police that conducted the investigation into this case, I think my understanding is they've never been able to track down these 3 men that were there.
Nobody's come forward. Hey, that was me. I was there.
This is aside from all of the other things that are kind of swirling around in the world in which this child indwelled, because to me, he is a child. He's 18. I know he's a child. You know how I talked when we first let in, Dave, about how circumstantial evidence many times can distract in an investigation, particularly in my world, if you don't focus on the injuries. Let's focus on the injuries just for a moment and remember this. After having been caught beneath a vehicle, Grant's cause of death was a single injury to the back of his head that has been related as being the fatal blow. Now, how did that blow come about? Did it come about as a result of being struck by a vehicle? Did it come about as a result of being rolled over by a vehicle? Did it come about as a result of being drugged by a vehicle? Or is it something else? Well, it's very specific. If you'll put your hand on the back of your head and go to the left side of the rear of your head, there was a laceration right there. And underlying that specific area is where the fatal injury exists. Now, Grant also had an injury to his left cheek, which would be on the same side of the head as the injury to the back of his head. And he also had an injury, a bruise on his hip. But other than that, his body is absent much of the trauma that you would normally associate with someone that had been struck and drugged and come to rest on a pile of rocks with 3,200 pound plus vehicle resting atop of the body. Because here's the thing. It has been stated that the truck was resting atop the body, and I guess the body was beneath the truck. But it has also been stated that potentially he had been rolled over by the tires, but there's not a lot of evidence to back that up.
Grant Solomon's manner of death was determined to be a tragic accident. An investigation determined Grant was killed after he was struck by his own vehicle. Aaron Solomon adamantly denies any wrongdoing in his son's death. He has not been charged in connection. A petition on change.org calls for further investigation.
I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.